8 o'clock in the morning in Bloomington. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you for attending another of our monthly webinars jointly organized by the IU ASEAN Global Gateway Office, as well as the IU School of Education. We welcome you all to this webinar, as well as our new Executive Director for the 5 IU ASEAN Global Gateway Office, Kathy Kerrigan. We are very, very honored today to have 2 scholars who will share insights on values education and the collaboration, the cross-institutional collaboration that they are initiating. We have today distinguished guests, and they are Maricris Acedo-Muega, Professor of Philosophy from the University of the Philippines, and Faye Camahalan, Dean and Professor of the School of Education at IU Southeast. The webinar will take the format of 30 minutes of conversation between our guests, our distinguished speakers, and 20 minutes of Q&A. And so audience members, you can post your questions anytime during the Q&A on the Q&A board. And at the end of 30 minutes, we'll start pulling out those questions, but you can post anytime. So Professor Acedo-Muega and Professor Camahalan and Dean Camahalan as well, welcome to the webinar and for joining us today. Please proceed.
Thank you, Dr. Pawan. I'm Faye Camahalan, and I'm Filipino-American. Good morning to everyone here in US, and good evening in the Philippines. And thank you for joining us. First, I'd like to thank the IU ASEAN Global Gateway for sponsoring this webinar. Thank you very much. And I'm an advocate of global education, so I'm very excited for this chat with my very good friend, Maricris. As a Filipino-American who's now based in US, I'm specifically with Indiana University Southeast. I came here in 2003. I finished all my formal schooling or education in the Philippines. And back then, I remember that we have a specific subject area, and we call it Good Manners and Right Conduct, GMRC. And we are graded for that. And that is part of your grade point average if you want to be an honor student. It is a standalone subject area that you have to make sure you ace it. So I'm really very curious on now that I'm a bit detached with my own culture, and I am now merged here in another culture. I would like to ask Dr. Maricris Acedo, who's a professor at College of Education, University of the Philippines. What is values education now in the Philippines? Just give us an overview.
Hello, Faye, and first I'd like to thank ASEAN Gateway of IU Bloomington and as well as IU Southeast School of Education with Dr. Farida Pawan and Dr. Camahalan, who was with us before in the UP College of Education before he went to IU Southeast. Yes, it's evening now in the Philippines, and I greet everyone good evening. And the question about values education and the topic as well about values education is a very important one for the Philippines, since we consider it to be the fiber or the backbone and the anchor on which our citizenship, our civic responsibility rests, because this one is where we are taught these kinds of things, our morals, how we should conduct ourselves in society. And that's true. When we were younger, Dr. Pe and I, we had this GMRC religious education even for our values education. And this has actually changed throughout the years. there came a time when values education became part of one course they called Makabayan. In Filipino, in English, it translates into nationalism, Makabayan. But that is made up of social studies, values education, health education. And that was a long time ago. And when we had the K to 12 reform years back, we had edukasyon sa pagpapakatao. In English, education for the human person, to develop your human person. And that became our values education. But now, because the law on values education, GMRC, was signed by then President Duterte, Rodrigo Duterte, we have now GMRC values education as a standalone course. You're correct. And we have GMRC, Good Manners and Right Conduct, for grades 1 to 6, and we have Values Education for grades 7 to 10. And this one is still anchored on the many facets of values education that we had in the past. And this one is still based on cultural beliefs and values of our people. But what we added to this would be, in terms of methodology, we wanted to emphasize to our students as early as grade 1, and until and up to grade 7, the idea of reasonableness, that there's a space for reason in things moral, in values education. When we think about moral dilemmas, we ought to be guided by our reasonableness. So I think it's very exciting to have that. And I think it's also doubly exciting since we need to be able to capacitate our teachers to teach them how to do this in actual classroom settings. Dr. Pei.
Thank you, Maricris. I remember when I was studying, I have to be in the Philippines, I have to be graded for politeness and obedience. And that's really a big deal for me. I think values education in the Philippines created a positive impact to my life. And I see it as a form of education that helps individuals to make informed decisions, considering several factors, and also considering your own values and your beliefs. Like value, what do you value in life? And we can, I'll ask more questions about that later on. But I'd like to share also that at Indiana University Southeast, we have our own core values. And we consider these core values as guiding principles. And I'm going to share my screen here really quick to everybody. And this is what's on our website. We have 4 core values: nurturing environment, holistic learning, integrity, and connectedness. And when we designed our strategic plan 2030, we are guided by this guiding principles. And our School of Education as a teacher preparation education is also guided by this. But I'd like to share to the audience that we have our own values, which we call teaching dispositions. Because as a teacher, there are expected behaviors and actions and character, professionally and both personally, right? So we have seven School of Education teaching dispositions, and this is also posted on our website. And I don't want to read what's on the screen, but I think one thing that impacts me a lot is that when we design our programming in teacher ed, we have to integrate all these teaching dispositions, and we have to make sure that when our student completes our program, that they are exhibiting and manifesting all these teaching dispositions. So I'm interested in the Philippines. What are the components of values ed curriculum? So if I'm a teacher in the Philippines, or if I'm in the teacher preparation education, in the Philippines, what is expected of me if I want to be a certified teacher?
Okay, so yes, Dr. Faye, our curriculum for values education, GMRC values education, is pretty new. It was just launched. The new one was launched last August 2023, following the law on the values education GMRC. What's distinct about this would be the emphasis on values education as a core subject. So it has the same, it takes on the same number of hours per week as the other courses such as science, mathematics, and English. So it's already a core course. And then we also have, because of this, the IRR says that after 5 years, those who will teach GMRC values education should be licensed teachers in values education, the ones who specialized on values education. That's why in the University of the Philippines values education program, where I am faculty, we stepped up and actually created a course, developed a course, which we now have BS Ed, Bachelor of Secondary Education major in values education, to address the call for teachers who will specialize in values education. Because if you've noticed, many of our teachers of values education would actually be coming from various areas, from guidance, from counseling, from psychology. So now that there's a law, the law says that those who will teach this after 5 years, because we're transitioning, should be those who have taken values education. And of course, if I may show you just for a short period here, the framework for values education. This is in Filipino, so I'll just explain. Like the IUS School of Education values, core values, this one takes on the whole school approach, which looks at the interplay between the family here, the school, and the community. So it now broadens the context of values education, the learning of values, to include even the community. And that's why when we talked about the assessment, we had a bit of a problem, since the community and the parents will now be involved in the rating of giving scores to the students, specifically for grades 1 to 6, or the key stage grades 1 to 3 for good manners and right conduct, GMRC. So this one is not the final one, because we added here in the underpinnings community of inquiry as a major approach in teaching values education. So we hope to be able to do this well this time around, because this one enables everyone to be part of the teaching of values to the Filipino youth and children.
Thank you, Maricris. I was just looking at the framework, and you have components of both the content and also the procedure for the pedagogy and what the teacher should be doing. And I really like that, because when I was a student in K-12 back then, I felt like there is a component of indoctrination and not much of value clarification and reasoning and making informed decisions. In the 4 components of the content, I don't know if I'm translating it right in English. You have makatao, which means people oriented, or talking about your personhood. And then Makadios is God-fearing, belief in God. And Makabansa is service to country. Like, what do you contribute to your country? Nationality and all that. And then Makakalikasan is, I think, something new. It talks about, I don't know how to translate, ecology or concern for the nature and environment, concern about your environment. So I do have a question, Maricris. Is corporal punishment still allowed in K to 12 schools? Because back in my time, it's perfectly okay.
Yes, it is not. It's no longer allowed in our time now. They have instituted laws to safeguard the well-being of students, and corporal punishment is definitely out. And that's why we had to retrain teachers, especially the from the older generations, that this one is not allowed. And the scenario these days in the Philippine basic education schools would be more open compared to our time before, more open and more inclusive. In that, there's even this suggestion that from the Department of Education that um, we should allow in schools uh, ecumenical prayers and not really religious ones, focusing only on one denomination, or one sect, but that students should be allowed to say their own faith statements, no, or prayers in school. So they had been practicing this, and in fact, in events, during events, they actually have these kinds of secular prayers and so on. So it's we're still a long way, I think, but we are starting. And I think, and I hope that all of these things that we're doing would eventually cascade or lead us to what we want to become as a people and as a nation. Yeah.
Thank you, Maricris. We have a lot of collaborations together. We've had previous projects. We have this, and I remember back in 2008, we started to do this exchange of students online to expose our students to different cultures. And I have a lot of projects with Maricris because we have this meeting of the minds wherein um, when we are teaching students, we teach the whole person and we just don't teach the content. Right? It's not just all about acing your test, but also helping the person grow professionally and personally. Um, what I want to say is last year, no, just this summer, I was there for a study abroad program in the Philippines. And I facilitated the study abroad because that's part of the pedagogy that I'd like to promote, to integrate the teaching dispositions to our future teachers. And now I'm actually planning of coming back and sharing what we do here for K to 12 partnerships, community engagement, because the hardest to teach is really values ed. Values are caught, not taught, in all that. It involves a lot of reflection. I guess my next question is, what is in the values education program of University of the Philippines that you would like to share, just in case some of our people here in US would like to do an exchange student and get into the program of and pursue a BS in bachelor's degree in values education.
Yes, our values education program for the secondary level in the University of the Philippines College of Education is actually one that is anchored on the idea of criticality, the idea that the person who will develop his or her character needs to be critical about many things, and even about and reflexive too. Criticality allows the person to be agentic because the person chooses. The student is able to choose and use reason to choose well, use the wealth of experience to be able to choose, make judgments, and come up with decisions. And then it's also criticality also allows for engagement, because when you are able to choose well, then you're able to engage properly too, in communities, in projects outside the school. And that's the one thing that we want to work with you. The one thing that we want us to work on, the idea of engagement, the idea of having that kind of aspect in values education in our program, engagement in communities. And that's why we have the whole school approach. We want to be able to engage outside the walls of the classroom.
I am excited to be there next year because I am going to share what we are doing here for K-12 partnerships and community engagement and service learning with our students. I did a pilot implementation this summer for the study abroad, and we are grateful to University of the Philippines for um, welcoming us and accommodating us. I guess another thing I'm thinking about, because you mentioned critical thinking and developing all those higher 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 learning strategies or higher thinking strategies through experiential uh, activities or programming. I I had a dilemma when I was here in 2003 because of some kind of cognitive dissonance in terms of values. I grew up with certain Filipino values, and it changed as I adapted to my new culture here. And I'm curious how this is happening now in Philippine education. I listed some of the Filipino values that I have here on my own. When I was growing up, there was this norm for some reason or agreement that you don't want to embarrass the whole group, and you always think of not just yourself, but make sure that you don't make the group uncomfortable, right? Make sure you don't offend somebody. There's a lot of importance in authority, and therefore also a lot of importance to obedience. Because now that I'm thinking about it, is when the teacher tells you to do this, you do this without question, because we respect the authority so much, and that we trust the teacher, that the teacher knows what's best for us. Another is do not disgrace the family, um, and service to society and make a positive impact to society, which I got from my education at University of the Philippines. So, what's going on right now in values ed in terms of these values that I've mentioned? That I think it's very unique to me. But then as I have conversations with other people in other cultures, it looks like some of those things are also being practiced in other cultures, or some people say that's a universal value, Faye. Like, everybody should be doing that.
Yes, that's a difficult question to answer, Pei. But yes, in the country right now, just like I think our other neighbors and other countries as well, our values education program is geared toward really teaching them how to be critical. But it's difficult to do just in just one sweep, considering the kind of culture that we have and the kind of upbringing that we've had in our whole own communities and our homes. And that's why the goal really is, the push really is for the whole school approach, where we will also involve parents and communities. I had always been an advocate of the whole school approach because I know that the school can only do so much. The curriculum is good, it's there. The teachers could be trained to teach this properly. But if in the homes and in the communities, these are not enhanced some more, and there are no avenues for the kids to really develop their character in their criticality in the communities and their homes, then this one will not really uh, lead to good outcomes the way we'd want our values education program to achieve. So we have to work hard and really hard to also take care of the aspect of parenting in the community. Yes, yeah, I know that these values actually could lead us to an extreme application, like when we just close our eyes to the things that the authorities do. But now I think we see changes, given that the social media component is there. No, the students learn from the social media. They see it even before we can teach this in the classroom, and that's why the urgent case of really teaching criticality comes in, reasonableness, so that they'll be able to sift through the many influences and ideas, and there's no other way to go but to teach them that, I think, through values education.
That's great. Thank you, Maricris. That's good to know. And hats off to you and the Philippine Department of Education for all those changes. I know you are part of this change, and you're one of the consultants. Um, Back in our days, you're right. When you're like old, you say that. Back in our days, the only source of information is probably what? Parents, or I will add teachers, of course. And now we have other sources of information like social media and technologies everywhere in the Philippines. So um, I'd like to really commend the whole school approach. I think that's very promising. Other things that I'd like to say are, because I have other values here that I listed, is modesty, shyness. There's a distinct Filipino shyness, especially for women in the Philippines, and I'm having a hard time to explain it. But it's not general shyness, but you're expected as a woman to be shy. I remember when I was new in US, I have this habit, and I still have it, but I think it's changing, wherein if I find something funny and I'd like to laugh about it, I will cover my mouth like that, because that's just I know that's the norm when I was growing up. For girls, when you find something funny, you use your hand to cover your mouth. And then when I came here, I got some kind of feedback from people around me. Don't cover your mouth when you're laughing. You have a very good smile. So things like that I like to share to the group. Um, that's very distinct in Filipino values. I've mentioned about authority and obedience, and I've mentioned about um, being not too loud or being modest. During my time, self promotion seems to be non existent. Like, you're not supposed to toot your own horn. Just stay quiet, be humble, and do the work and get the job done. So I don't know how that is being addressed now in the Philippines. Any thoughts,
I think
Mike?
yeah, from our time, I think many things have changed. I think many of the Filipino kids these days are are not so much like us before, maybe because of social media influence, and the walls or the global structure has changed, and they are a bit mobile these days, going from one country to another for some Filipinos. And I think it really has to do with the kind of school culture too, that or the family culture that is that the student is in. And that's why when we talk about uh, the culture, we talk also about the changes that has happened in here, and many of these changes have been brought about by education pay. And yes, some of these are still there, but I think some of these are
So we are, I think we have a little bit of a pause there, but I'm sure Maricris will join us again. So there's a slew of questions here that's coming up. Maricris, you're back. Very good. And so we have a lot of questions that have popped up from the audience. And I have 3 devices here. So I'm going to take the first question that came up through a device, because I think the question is foundational. The first is that a need for clarification. What are values? Because what's being heard is, is it cultural transmission? Is it religious values? Is it critical thinking? And several more others. And so there's somewhat of a confusion here as to what constitutes values education. Maricris, are you there? Maricris is coming up. In the meantime, Faye, do you want to say something? Oh, here goes Maricris. Maricris, did you get the question?
yes, it's about I'd like a repeat of the question, please. I just came back from
Right, welcome back. Right.
Yes.
So we have a lot of questions. I'm just going to ask you a short one, which is a need for clarification as to what values education is, because there are like 5 components, but there's confusion as to whether the values are cultural, transmission of cultural values, religious values, political values, or even the idea of critical thinking as when you mention reasonableness. And so there's a need for clarification there, if there is one, or can you help us, please?
Okay, so I think I'll share again this one for our audience, and I'll as we have explained earlier, this one follows the whole school approach. That's the framework, and then we have on the gray areas of the circle, we have the family, the school, and the community, and then of course inside would be the methods. I mean, the kinds of the process that that you want to teach them, the skills. Pag-unawa here on the green um, top part would be understanding. Pagsangguni is actually like you analyze, you consult, and then you have pagninilay, reflection. Pagpapasya is decision making. Pagkilos is action, acting on it, and pagsabuhay is living it. So it follows that kind of process. And then, of course, we focus on that's right, makatao for the person, the development of the human person. Then makabansa for the country. It's the service that we need to do for the country. Makakalikasan, which Dr. Kamahalan, Dr. Faye earlier said was added. It's ecology, nature, environment, and makadiyos is love of the faith that we have. So it's there in the whole thing. And this one is what is followed when crafting the curriculum and in teaching too. And the underpinnings here on the left, here's the rectangular thing would be the batayang legal basis. So we have the laws of the land, we have the Constitution of the Philippines, we have the new GMRC Values Education Law, and the Philippine Development Plan as basis of this framework. Then we have the philosophical basis, personalism, which looks at the human person, and then ethics of virtue ethics, which really talks about the various moral principles. What's added here would be community of inquiry, the idea that the person is agentic, could actually decide and think about, and that's where criticality comes in. Though this one is not the final one. And then the guide to the theory would be from anthropology, the idea of the person in the culture and community, sociological, psychological, and technological, and the needs of the children, the needs of the child, the Filipino child, as well as the global aspect of it. So yes, it's this is the whole thing on which the curriculum for values education was based, and where the teaching strategies would also be based too.
Mhm. So we have some provocative questions here. One of them is so this is where the heat starts coming in. And not heat in terms of, there's a lot of interest. From Keith Barton, in the Philippines, how much of a gap is there between theory and practice, between curricular goals such as reasonableness, human-centeredness, and actual classrooms, which in many settings, not necessarily in the Philippines, but in many settings tend to emphasize more authoritarian goals?
Yes, that's the main concern. I think the idea of being able to translate theory into practice is a big thing in the country. And we had always been saying that we can only do this in values education if the framing would be centered on criticality, because that's where you could look at the progression of the skills of the learners, how they have developed the skills to look at various scenarios so that they could come up with decisions that would be good for them and for the other people. And to choose from dilemmas, moral dilemmas, it's difficult. In a country like the Philippines, I would admit it's difficult. That's why we are starting this, at least in our program and in the University of the Philippines. We would like to see the kind of values education that would enable us to really look into how this will be translated into, conduct of our learners, of the Filipino children, as well as the kinds of decisions that they would make when they grow up, or even now, even as children. Yeah.
I mean, there are other provocative questions too that follow that statement, but I'll take Joseph's question. What can you say in terms of values education and the child protection policy in the Philippines? In your opinion, does it foster student well-being, or is it just creating undisciplined, misbehaving, entitled students?
Yes, it's also one concern these days. Maybe because of a confluence of many things, like the kind of upbringing in the home for these kids, as well as the impact of social media, peer pressure too. But I think, yes, there is that bit of a problem at the onset and at the outset when you look at it, because the kids now are more opinionated. They speak their minds and they may not really follow like we did before during my time. But I think these are good signs that we are getting there, and that it will be difficult for the teachers, definitely, because there are those who abuse. So there are those learners who tend to, uh, to the extreme and not really follow the teacher, not given the assignments on time and so on. And it gives so much pressure on the teachers, put so much pressure on them. And I think that the teachers should also they also need to be able to situate themselves in these kinds of scenarios where there are things like this. Yeah.
So the next question, Juliana, I think is bordering on the issue of whose values are being taught. So she asks, I'm curious about how sensitive and controversial topics, some of them are a taboo in their community, are handled in values education in the US and in the Philippines, for example. So in other words, whose values and who's making the judgment as to what's being taught, and the suitability of the topics of values being taught as well. So I think it's addressing both the situation in the Philippines and in the US. So I think both of you perhaps could take turns addressing that.
Yes, Faye, you'd like to?
Yes, I can chime in. I guess let me just go back really quick. first question was about what is values education, and I would say values education is both a what and also a how. But I see it more of as a process in the framework presented by Maricris. She has the components, but she also has the how. So values education is continuing, right? And it's it's more into this pedagogy of teaching students how to learn and not just what to learn. There's also a gap of theories and practice of teaching dispositions here in the School of Education. That's why, as dean, I'm highly interested and involved in closing this gap. So I agree, the theory and practice, we have to do more work. In terms of whose norm or whose values we are talking about here, I can speak for the School of Education teaching dispositions. When we developed our teaching dispositions, we involved everybody, including the constituents, to be able to develop this. We did not just say, okay, these are the 7 teaching dispositions you need to follow and you need to have. We have consulted, of course, the faculty, started brainstorming about what values and norms are expected of a K to 12 teacher, a professional teacher, and then we consulted our own students, our current students, alumni, and we also consulted our K to 12 school partners. So it's a shared beliefs of now another school of education from another culture can have their own list of teaching dispositions.
Mhm.
Yes, and in the Philippines, the same thing happened for the basic education curriculum, values education (GMRC). We looked at the historical data that we had from the previous curricula, and then of course we looked at the contributions of the experts, values education, the ones who actually worked on the first round of curriculum for MRC values or basic education teachers teaching values education. So they know what it is that they need to teach on the ground. And then the curriculum was also opened for the stakeholders, including everyone from the community. And many commented, and the revisions happened and were done. And so it's a collaboration actually of many stakeholders, but definitely we cannot actually consult all of them uh, in longer periods of time, but that consultation really happened. And yes, there's a question also of the global citizenship, and it's in fact part of the values education curricula, global citizenship, uh, values for global citizenship. And I think this is the one that we should uh, also strengthen, to look at the common humanity of everyone, regardless of background or orientation and even culture, but not really forgetting about cultural nuance too, because that is part of the whole thing. But that the respect for diversity should be there too. Yes.
So there are 2 related questions, and I'm going to pick and choose. One of them, again, Keith had read your article, Acedo-Muega's article, and Acedo-Muega's article on democratic education. So one of the contexts for this is Macadillos is a value that's related to God, and so are there to faith essentially. So are there schools or teachers in the Philippines who take more of an agnostic approach to democratic education vis-a-vis your article and Mike's article, Maricris?
Yes, that's the one that we need to develop some more, enhance some more in Philippine schools. The criticality to really, look at values, considering that the Philippines is, 80% plus Catholic in terms of religion, and this one, this religion thing is actually a big thing in the country. But now we're happy to note that in the curriculum, the values education GMRC curriculum, this one takes on a more a wider perspective to include all the religions that we have here, and to make it more ecumenical or secular, even to include those who would have different beliefs. We also have a different values education program for Islamic education for Muslim Mindanao, the Bangsamoro region there in Muslim Mindanao. It's called Alive. It's actually a different program that they have for Arabic language and Islamic values. And it's also under the Department of Education. So they take this one, the curriculum GMRC values education, and they have another one for Islamic values education. So they have both of these curricula for these Islamic schools. Yes.
Interesting, because I think that's probably an interesting discussion as to what values education can include, which is related to Donna's question and from IUSE, which is, when I was in the Philippines with Faye and you, Maricris, this May, one of the things I learned was that how diverse, how many thousands of islands, how many diverse groups there are in the Philippines. So in terms of cultural and linguistic diversity, how is that part of values education? What is the inclusion? What is the type? What is identity development part of values education as per Donna's question? In DEI, essentially, the focus. Maricris or Faye, or I think Maricris.
I guess while waiting for Maricris, she's the more credible person to talk about what's happening in the Philippines right now. But in my experience, I was from a small town in the province, and we did not experience a lot of diversity. It's just us. I mingled with people from the same town, and I got my DEI education when I attended college at University of the Philippines, and it changed me. When the history teacher who wrote the book that we're using for the class, for the course, said that what you learn about the history of the Philippines is wrong. We're going to read a new book written by me, and this is going to open your mind. And so UP, University of the Philippines, has cultivated that value of skepticism and questioning, disturbing the norm, disrupt the norm, and service to nation, making an impact and advocate for change. So I guess that's my part. Maricris, I was just a placeholder here for that question.
Yes, what I got earlier was about language. If diversity in language and cultures, subcultures here in the country play a part in values ed curriculum and the teaching of it. Yes, it does, very much so. Since the values are actually culled from the many communities that we have here in the country, and we hope that we have taken care of those too. And before, we used to have the mother tongue language-based education for our key stage 1 students, K to 3, but now it has changed to Filipino and English. So the teachers can still use mother tongue, but it's just as a strategy for teaching. It's not really a course that we have. But now it's Filipino and English, and values education is taught in Filipino. So it's a bit of a difficult thing for us because I come from the Visayan region. UP, the university where I'm in right now, is in Luzon. That's the biggest region, and then we have Mindanao. And I come from the Visayas, and my first language is not Filipino. So my first language is Kinaraya, which is from our region. And my second language, I think, from school is English. So Philippine schools, we have English as medium of instruction, following the structure that the Americans have given us when they were here, and when the public education system started, was actually developed by them. So we have English as a second language for many of us. in the other regions. It's only in Luzon where Filipino is spoken, and I have to admit that even I am having difficulty reading the values education curriculum. That's why this has to be translated for, for like people like us who cannot really speak Filipino. But
Yeah.
now it's Filipino, so that our learners actually understand it better, and take to heart, no, the values of being a Filipino citizen.
Now we have several minutes here, and there are several questions about unresolved issues. So I'm going to list them, and you both can decide which to take them on, because I think the questions are fabulous. And so the first is, does values education being embedded in part of the curriculum and the subject areas, does it make it difficult to teach your discipline objectively? So that's one, right? Number two, right, is, the why. Why teach values education? You've talked about the how and the why. I think Juliana probably mentioned that. I think one of the questions was, the how and the way to do it, but why? The third is the question of, values education is emerged with Americans, the American system. Has there been pushback against that in terms of the idea of, the colonial past and their quote unquote, what you want to call it, introduction or imposition of values into the, Filipino educational system? And finally, the question of assessment. How do you measure achievement in a values education class? So there are 4 questions. You can take one at a time or none at all. I just leave it up to you. We have a few minutes here, but good minutes.
I think at the moment, the serious concern that we have would be assessment in values education, and definitely in GMRC, good manners and right conduct. When you talk about values education, and if it is framed in the reasonableness framework and criticality framework, then you would be guided. There's a question also by Dr. Coker-Colo on how reasonableness is defined. Then there would be some tools for this, or some studies that would tell us how to measure this, specifically in ethics, for example, and even in philosophy. Yes, we have this, and even in our one of our courses in the Bachelor of Secondary Education in Values Education in the University of the Philippines College of Ed, teach about this. There's this one course that handles this, that talks about this, and it's difficult though to be very conclusive, and to take on an absolutist position when it comes to values education, because yes, this should really be viewed longitudinally. When you talk about a person who has developed a certain kind of character, a good character for that matter, then the lens would shift now to that one, which would allow us to be more flexible. So assessment becomes very, very daunting here. Yes, and in the current curriculum, the new one, Matatag, we call it Matatag Curriculum, GMRC Values Ed, they actually have for GMRC Values Ed grades 1 to 6, they would involve the parents and the learner and the teachers. So the threefold sources of the scores for values education. And there are weights and percentages, and we really hope, that's why we need to train the parents too. We need to talk to the parents and empower them too, so that they would know how to do this and how to really help their kids, and even the community. So there's a lot of things to do here, engagement even in the community, definitely because of that assessment framework that's being used, involving three major sources: the learner, the teacher, the school, and the community, the parents. So yes, Faye could definitely help us on this.
That's part of the collaborative project that I'm looking forward to when I visit again the Philippines next year. I would like to share to them what we do on how we assess the teaching dispositions of our students, and we assess them progressively as they get admitted to the program, and then when they are about to complete the program, we develop through co-constructions with our K-12 partners and also students and of course faculty and staff in the community, an instrument of a self-report scale wherein students will self-report in the beginning and also self-report at the end of the program. And then in between, we also instructors assess them using the scale, and then instructors of education courses also embed the teaching dispositions in the scoring rubric. And I know the magnitude of the challenge in the Philippines is if you are dealing with nationwide with K to 12 schools, how do you do that? But I think that's a good start of having like a checklist or a criteria wherein the teacher will the teacher could use. And I like what Maricris mentioned about also training the teachers, because we also have to be trained to use our own instrument for validity and more of actually reliability of using the instrument. So that's what we do here in terms of assessment. I guess I would like to talk about, the first issue that was mentioned, which is, does it make it more difficult to discipline students? I think it's easier if you have that. I know, Mary Chris, it's different in your case, but for me, values ed, like what Maricus mentions, is it's continuing, right? You set the foundation for critical thinking and the process of making informed decisions to students. And then as life goes on, it changes. It actually life gets better actually as you get older because of your life experiences, and then you start to evaluate your values, what is important to you, because values ed is very say challenging because it talks about uh, what is good for everybody, what is good for you, what is right for you, what is right for everybody.
Faye, sorry to interrupt, but the
Go
question
ahead.
was, because values education is embedded in the discipline, um, is it more difficult to teach the discipline objectively?
Like the content, is
Yeah.
it is it I know, because it goes hand in hand. For teacher preparation, you cannot be just a smart teacher. You have to have the expected teaching dispositions to be able to teach all students. Okay? To be able to integrate the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion, you have to have that teaching dispositions that when one student is not learning, how can you change your pedagogy to make sure the student learns the same lesson that he or she deserves to learn? Because learning is for everybody.
Mhm.
Um,
I think the question more, like for instance, in the article by
okay.
Muega is more Muega and Acedo-Muega is the issue of, like for instance, in the science and math teachers, in terms of what values are. It's more toward critical thinking rather than religion and the questioning of not the questioning, but more the focus on criticality. And so that if you're teaching math and science, perhaps that might be something that those teachers raised. They did raise that actually. They focus more on criticality than the other set of values. And so that was the focus there of the question. So we're at 1 minute. I don't know whether you want to respond, Maricris.
Actually, just to close also, because it's already 9 o'clock, just to thank everyone who's here with us, and who Dr. Farida Pawan in the ASEAN Gateway Office of Indiana University, Bloomington, Indiana University Southeast School of Education, Dr. Faye, the faculty, the students, and those who attended here, my students too. And we hope we were able to. This is a good discussion, and we should have more of this, especially for values education, to help us sift through all of this and come up with many good programs for our learners, especially here in the Philippines too. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We're right on the hour. And so as you can see, there are many, many questions that are being raised. Like I said, we have three devices going, and the questions are coming in left and right. And so, the subject is of huge interest. The Philippines is of huge interest to all of us, not just in the ASEAN Gateway, but for our academic community as well. With that, we would like to thank you, Dr. and Professor Maricris Acedo-Muega, and Dean and Professor Faye Camahalan. Thank you, both of you, and thank you everyone for being here. The recording will be sent out shortly. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.